My neighbor insisted I cut down a 100-year-old tree on my land. When I refused, I found it chopped to pieces with a note that read, "You should have listened." At a town meeting, he smiled and said, "Now you can see the sky again." When the rain came, my basement flooded, and then I realized. I lived just outside Asheville, North Carolina, in a quiet little place called Bent Creek. Not a lot of folks here, and that's the way we like it. People wave when they pass you, and most of us still leave our doors unlocked during the day. My family's been on this land for close to 100 years. My granddad built the house I live in now. I grew up climbing trees, digging in the dirt, and running through the woods. It's not fancy, but it's mine. One of the things I loved most about this place was the big white oak in the yard. Stood right on the edge of the ridge that borders the back of my property. That tree was massive. Taller than my house, with roots that curled like fingers into the earth. My granddad planted it back in the 1920s. Said he wanted something that would outlive all of us. It almost did. Then George Connors moved in. He bought the property next to mine, one of those lots that had sat empty for years. A developer had cleared it back in the 90s, but nobody ever built anything. George did. Big modern box of a house with steel and glass, totally out of place among the older homes in the area. He moved here from somewhere up north, Jersey or Connecticut, I forget which, and thought he was going to turn our town into his little weekend paradise. He introduced himself the first day with a fake smile and a bottle of cheap wine. I didn't like him, but I was polite. Gave him a tour of the property line, showed him where my land ended and his began. 3 weeks later, he came knocking again. I'll never forget it. It was a Tuesday. I just finished mowing, sweating like hell, and there he was, standing on my porch with that damn smile. "You ever think about cutting down that oak?" he asked, pointing toward the tree like he was asking about a junk car I forgot to haul off. I stared at him. "No. Never. It blocks a lot of sun from my house. My panels don't get full exposure in the afternoon. It's kinda killing the whole idea of my off-grid setup." I shrugged. "Trees on my land?" George raised his eyebrows. "Yeah, but still, thought we could work something out. I'll pay for the removal. You won't have to lift a finger." I shook my head. "It's not coming down." That should have been the end of it. But George didn't let it go. The next couple weeks, he brought it up over and over. Always friendly, always smiling, but there was something behind his eyes. Something cold. "You know those roots might mess with your foundation one day. You're not worried about storms? That thing could flatten your roof. I've got a guy who says it's got early signs of rot. He could be wrong, but you might want to get it checked." Each time, I told him no. I told him to drop it. But he didn't. Then one morning, I woke up to silence. I always heard that tree in the mornings, the birds, the breeze through the branches. But that day, nothing. Just a weird kind of stillness, like something was missing. I walked outside, and my stomach dropped. The oak was gone. Gone. All that was left was a stump, rough, jagged, and raw. The whole thing had been chopped into chunks and stacked like firewood along the fence line. There was sawdust everywhere. And leaning against the stump was a piece of wood with a message burned into it. "You should have listened." I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. That tree wasn't just a tree. It was family. My granddad's hands had planted it. My dad and I built a swing on it when I was a kid. I carved my initials into it the day I turned 10. It was mine. And someone had taken it. I knew who. I went straight to George's house, pounding on his door hard enough to shake it. But he didn't answer. His car wasn't in the driveway. I must have stood there for 10 minutes, heart pounding, fists clenched. When he didn't show, I called the sheriff. Filed a report. They came out, took some pictures, asked around. George told them he'd been out of town, Atlanta, visiting his daughter. Had pictures of himself at a brunch, standing next to her with a damn mimosa. Sheriff said without proof, there wasn't much they could do. My word against his. The town was buzzing. Everyone heard about it. Some folks were pissed on my behalf. Others kept quiet. At the next town meeting, I stood up and told everyone what happened. Told them about the note, the tree, and how George had been harassing me to take it down. George sat in the second row, arms crossed, legs stretched out like he owned the place. When I finished talking, he leaned back and said loud enough for the whole room to hear, "Well, now you can see the sky again." There were a few chuckles. Some folks smiled. I didn't. I left before I did something stupid. The worst part? I still had to live next to him. Still had to see that smirk every time he stepped out to get his mail. He'd wave sometimes, like nothing had happened. Then the rain came. 2 weeks after the tree was cut, we had a heavy storm. The kind we get once or twice a year. Sheets of water pouring down for hours. I didn't think much of it. My house is old but solid. Been through worse. Until I walked downstairs. My basement was flooded. Not just wet, flooded. Water up to my ankles. Mud, leaves, debris floating around. Tools ruined. Boxes soaked through. Old photo albums destroyed. My dad's military trunk, the one with his uniforms and medals, was filled with water. I stood there, knees shaking, staring at the mess. And then it hit me. The tree. The oak had been holding the slope behind my house together. Its roots ran deep into the ridge. Without them, the soil turned to mush, and the rain had nothing to slow it down. George had known. He knew what would happen. He'd studied the land, knew about the grade, knew how the water would run. He didn't just cut down a tree. He set a trap. He wanted this. The damage. The destruction. All of it. Maybe he thought I'd sell. Maybe he thought I'd break. But he didn't know me. After the flood, I spent days cleaning out the basement. The smell of mildew and rot stuck to my skin no matter how much I scrubbed. I was mad. No, I was beyond mad. I was hollow. That kind of hollow that makes you quiet. Cold. People kept telling me to let it go. That it wasn't worth the trouble. That it would only make things worse. They didn't understand. That tree was a line in the sand. George crossed it. Then he smiled while standing on the other side. So I started watching him. Every morning, he had a routine. Woke up at 6:30 sharp. Did yoga on his back deck like some kind of stretched-out rooster. Drank protein smoothies. Worked from home 3 days a week, always on video calls in his little glass-walled office. Fridays, he left early and drove to the gym in town. He always came back around 6. He kept his lawn perfect. Lines so straight they looked drawn with a ruler. He had motion lights, cameras at every corner of the house, and even those stupid smart sensors in the driveway that pinged his phone when someone came close. But everyone's got a blind spot. George had too. The first, his landscaping guy, Enrique, came every other Tuesday. George wasn't home when he worked. Left a check under the mat, and Enrique let himself into the backyard to do the trimming, mowing, and hedge shaping. The second, a garden bed along the west side of his house. Raised planters, all vegetables and herbs. George bragged about them all the time, his organic oasis. What he didn't know was that the drainage under those beds fed into a tiny runoff pipe that ran down toward the back corner of my land. It was old, built by the town years ago to help with erosion. But George tapped into it illegally. I found it after the flood, following the path of the water. That was the first part of the plan. I started collecting samples of the runoff. Brought them to an old friend of my dad's, Frankie Delmont, retired city engineer. Frankie tested the water and found traces of fertilizers and some nasty stuff not meant for open drainage. With that, we had him on code violations. Frankie told me exactly what to do and who to report it to. But I didn't report it. Not yet. Because I wasn't done. The second part was even better. I got close to Enrique. Started offering him cold drinks when he worked. Asked him about his family. Paid him to trim a few bushes on my side just to talk. After a few weeks, we were friendly. One day, I asked him how long he'd been working for George. "Almost a year," he said. "Guy's picky. Complains about everything. Always watching through the window. Kinda creepy." I asked him if George ever gave him keys to anything. He laughed. "No way. Doesn't trust anyone. Even installed a new lock on the shed after I borrowed his rake once." Bingo. I asked Enrique if he wanted some extra cash. "Nothing illegal. Just a little help." He looked nervous at first, but money talks. Especially when someone's been treated like crap by a rich jerk in yoga pants. He agreed. On the next landscaping day, Enrique left the side gate open and dropped something into one of George's raised beds. Something Frankie gave me. Let's just say it was a special kind of compost. One that made the plants look sick within a week. Yellowed leaves, drooping vines, powdery mold. George was furious. He posted on the town Facebook group asking if anyone had trouble with plant blight. Asked if maybe some old trees were leaching toxins into the soil. I nearly choked on my coffee. He ripped the beds out within a month. Thousands in lumber, soil, and irrigation, gone. But I still wasn't done. Remember that little runoff pipe? I traced it, with Frankie's help, and found that it connected to a much larger system under the neighborhood. George's illegal tapping meant he was pushing wastewater into the main system. One heavy rain could back it up, into his house. All I had to do was let the right person know. But first, I paid a visit to George. I knocked on his door just after dark. He opened it slow, suspicious. I held a folder in my hand. "What's this?" he asked. "Your future," I said. "You like surprises, right?" He flipped through the pages. Photos of his illegal tap-in, test results of his garden runoff, statements from Frankie. His face went pale. "You're bluffing. Try me." "What do you want?" I smiled. "You'll know soon enough." Then I walked away. 3 nights later, during a thunderstorm, I turned off the floodgate valve Frankie had marked for me. It wasn't sabotage, it was letting the system run the way it was designed. The pressure backed up. Right into George's sleek, glass-walled office. Water poured in under the foundation, swamped the smart panels, destroyed the wiring, fried his solar inverter. Insurance didn't cover it, they called it negligent infrastructure tampering. He lost power for days. His insurance rates tripled. His house, his pride and joy, was now flagged by the city. But I still wasn't done. After the water wrecked his office, George went quiet for a while. No yoga on the deck. No smug waves at the mailbox. No smart-ass Facebook posts about off-grid superiority. It was like the storm had wiped the grin off his whole life. But I knew him well enough by then. He wasn't the type to quit. He was the type to plot. So I watched. And waited. Sure enough, he started making moves again. He called in contractors. Not local guys, people from out of town. Trucks with no logos. They came in the middle of the day, sometimes late at night. Dug around the base of his house. Hauled in heavy pumps, drainage tanks, even rebar and concrete. Quiet upgrades, all off the books. He was rebuilding. Stronger this time. That told me 2 things. He still had money, and he hadn't figured out who had messed with him. But then something strange happened. 2 weeks later, I got a visit from a man in a black pickup. Didn't recognize him. Said his name was Ron, claimed he was looking to buy property in the area. Asked if I'd ever considered selling. When I asked how he got my name, he said, "A friend." I told him I wasn't selling. 3 days after that, I got a letter. No return address. Inside was a 1-page offer, $300,000 cash for my property, no inspection needed, closing in 30 days. Just a name at the bottom. Skyline Holdings LLC. That's when it clicked. George wasn't just trying to get back at me. He was trying to push me out. I did some digging. Called in a favor from my cousin who works at the county records office. She pulled everything she could find on Skyline Holdings. They were brand new. Created just 6 months earlier. But guess who signed the incorporation paperwork? George Connors. He was building a shell company. Trying to buy me out under the table, so no one could trace it back to him. Probably planning to buy my land cheap, then flip it after. Cleaning up the neighborhood. I wasn't about to let that happen. So I hit him where it hurt next. Remember Enrique, the landscaping guy? Well, turns out his cousin works for the Department of Environmental Quality. I told him about the illegal pipe, about the runoff, about the rebuild without permits. He said, "Let me make a call." A week later, George had state inspectors crawling all over his land. Not just local, state. They walked the property with clipboards, took soil samples, even drilled near his septic system. They found 3 violations. Fines in the thousands. His tap-in pipe was officially ordered to be removed. His renovations were flagged as unpermitted construction, meaning everything he built since the flood had to be torn out or inspected again, at his cost. That same week, someone broke into his shed. Didn't steal anything. Just dumped a 5-gallon bucket of deer urine across his expensive tools and the riding mower. Made the whole place reek like a rutting season massacre. I didn't do it. But I heard about it from the guys at the hardware store, and I didn't feel bad either. Then came the real twist. One night, I'm sitting out on my porch, just watching the stars, when I hear a crash from George's place. Not thunder. Something hard. Then glass breaking. Then shouting. I walked down the property line and saw it, George dragging a woman's suitcase down the steps. She was screaming at him, throwing things. He yelled back, something about promises and this place was supposed to be an investment. She called him a liar. Said he'd ruined everything. Said he used her name on the loan. That's when it hit me. George didn't own his place alone. He'd used someone, either a partner or a girlfriend, to sign off on the mortgage. Maybe he didn't have the credit. Maybe his cash wasn't as deep as he pretended. Either way, she was done. Drove off that night and didn't come back. I couldn't believe it. His little empire was starting to fall apart, and I hadn't even laid a hand on him. Not directly. The next week, his contractor left. I watched him throw tools in the truck and peel off. George stood in the yard, yelling into his phone, pacing in circles like a caged dog. That night, he snapped. I woke up to lights in my yard. Someone had thrown bricks through my truck's windshield. My mailbox was smashed. The old oak stump, what was left of it, was doused in gasoline and lit on fire. But here's the thing. I had cameras. And this time, I was ready. The fire on the stump didn't spread. It fizzled out in minutes, thanks to the rain the night before. But it was enough. The message was clear. George wasn't just angry. He was coming unglued. What he didn't know, what he never thought about, was that I had installed a full camera setup 3 weeks earlier. Motion-activated, wide-angle, night vision. Paid a pretty penny for it, but it was worth every cent. That night, it caught him red-handed. Walking across my lawn. Carrying bricks in a pillowcase. Dousing the stump in fuel. Lighting the match. The footage was crisp. Face clear as day. Time-stamped. One camera even caught him flipping off my house after he lit the fire. I called the sheriff that morning. This time, they didn't hesitate. No. He said. No guessing. They arrested him that afternoon. I stood on my porch as they put him in the cruiser. He didn't look at me. Not once. Just stared straight ahead, like if he ignored me, none of it was real. But it was. The charges? Trespassing. Arson. Vandalism. Destruction of property. He made bail, but he was cooked. Court dates were set. His perfect reputation gone. The town finally saw what I'd seen from the beginning. But it didn't stop there. His mortgage partner, her name was Denise, I found out, filed a civil suit. Claimed he'd forged documents. The bank froze his accounts while they investigated. His permits were pulled. Code enforcement fined him again for unfinished construction. His house, already flagged, was now listed as a hazard. Then came the final blow. The city condemned the structure due to water damage, illegal plumbing, and unstable foundation. He was forced to leave. Couldn't even sell it, not without spending more to fix it than he had left in the bank. Last I heard, George moved in with a cousin down in Charleston. Couldn't find work, not in his field. Word got around. And me? I rebuilt the stump. Not the tree. You can't replace something like that. But I built a bench there. Used the old roots as support. Every morning, I sit there with my coffee, looking over the ridge. No more runoff. No more threats. Just the sound of birds and wind. But I'll be honest with you, I made my own mistakes too. I let the anger run me for too long. I let it rot something inside. I became obsessed, and that obsession nearly dragged me down to his level. I hurt people around me. I pushed folks away. Lost sleep. Lost parts of myself. But I also learned this: some people think land is just dirt. Just a place to build a house and hang a porch swing. But not me. This land, my land, has bones. It has memory. You don't get to tear that down just because you want more sunlight or better views. You don't get to erase history and expect no one to fight back. George learned that the hard way. And I'll never forget the look on his face the last time I saw him, walking out of court with his suit wrinkled, hair a mess, and that proud grin finally gone. He thought he was digging up a tree. He didn't know he was waking something deeper,